Okay, so we're kind of like in this weird situation when it comes to the X-Men at the moment, our coverage over the X-Men. And what I mean by that statement is that we're kind of like in this middle part that leads into the Hunt for Xavier storyline. Like we're technically done with Operation Zero Tolerance, and you do have a few things here and there pop up that kind of reference that last crossover, but getting into the next big X-Men storyline, which is Hunt for Xavier, we're going to have a few story arcs where they may not seem that important, but technically they're building blocks for bigger storylines down the road, like this one right here, because we're going to cover Uncanny X-Men issues number 356 and 357. And with this two-part story arc, again, it may seem like nothing really important, but again, it's building blocks for bigger storylines down the road. And so, as we get into Uncanny X-Men issue number 356, we do pick up with Archangel, Beast, and also Iceman as they had just arrived in Alaska in a rental car heading over to where Cyclops and Jean Grey are at. Because when it came to Operation Zero Tolerance, we had learned that for Cyclops, he had a bomb placed inside his body by Bastion. Now, right after Operation Zero Tolerance, we had learned that Dr. Reyes was able to remove the bomb out of his body as a way to save his life. And so when it came to Jean Grey, she kind of requested, but so did the doctor, that her and Cyclops kind of get some rest away from the X-Men. So they went over to Alaska where Cyclops' grandparents live at. And so for those two characters, they're kind of just, relaxing at the moment. But Cyclops left a message at the school of Charles Xavier because he's currently freaking out about Jean Grey. And I'll explain why here in a moment. But while you do have Beast, Archangel, and also Iceman heading over to where Cyclops and Jean Grey are currently staying in Alaska, well, they have a car accident. And the reason why, because they almost hit an animal who was just crossing the road. But this leads into our heroes meeting up with Chris Miller. Now, Chris Miller is the sheriff of the city, but also this dude does not really like mutants, but he has no idea that Cyclops and Jean Grey are mutants, but he knows Scott Summers and Jean Grey and said, hey, if you're friends of theirs, let me go ahead and help you guys get over there because your car is right now completely wrecked out of the accident. And so you do have the sheriff take our heroes over to Cyclops and Jean Grey's home. But before they leave, Iceman saw somebody hiding in the bushes. That guy becomes somewhat important in the second chapter of the storyline. Now we do switch back over to Rogue and Wolverine back at the Institute. Now, this is going to lead into the second plot line of this two-part story arc when it comes to the character of Rogue, because you do have Rogue leaving the school right now to go for a meeting with some other character. Now, for Wolverine, he's waiting for S.H.I.E.L.D. to pick up Sauron. We kind of cut that storyline in an earlier video when you had Sauron attack the school. But for Wolverine, he remembers that for Rogue, she kind of felt in a dark place, and he wants to make sure that she is okay. Now, she does confirm to him like she is okay, but for Wolverine, he's kind of wondering like what's going on with her. But getting back over to Alaska, we do pick up with our three heroes arriving at the home that belongs to, well, Cyclops and Jean Grey for the time being. Now, the sheriff, his wife is there as well. His wife name is Stacy Murphy Miller, and her sister is Melissa Murphy. Now, Melissa will become not really super important for the storyline, but she is there in the storyline. So I kind of go ahead and say like who she is so that you guys will recognize her in later parts of this video. But for Jean Grey, she had no idea that they were going to have company for the week or whatever. So to see Beast, Archangel, and also Iceman there is really surprising to her, but at the same time, she's very happy about the idea of seeing her friends. Because remember, this was the first class of the X-Men, these five characters right here. Now, when it comes to Cyclops, the reason why he called Beast and also Iceman and Archangel is because in an earlier video, you had Jean Grey just show up out of nowhere wearing the Phoenix outfit. And this kind of leads into the complicated past of Jean Grey. And let me explain. You see, when it came to Jean Grey, back in the early Chris Claremont days, we had saw Jean Grey turn into the Phoenix and also the Dark Phoenix. And so we were kind of left to believe that Jean Grey was the Dark Phoenix and she died as the Dark Phoenix. But here comes the big plot twist because later on in Marvel's timeline, you had a Fantastic Four and the Avengers find Jean Grey inside a cocoon. Now, here's the catch because we saw Jean Grey die as the Dark Phoenix at the end of the Dark Phoenix saga. The thing was, that was never Jean Grey. What the Phoenix did was, after placing Jean Grey inside a cocoon to allow her to heal up properly, you then had the Phoenix turn herself into a copy of Jean Grey and pretended to be Jean Grey and kind of believed she was the real Jean Grey. And so when it came to the Dark Phoenix saga, Jean Grey was never the Phoenix. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and skip over a few things because we get into Madeline Pryor and the whole idea of Madeline Pryor and Mr. Sinister. But getting into the present day, you had Jean Grey just appear out of nowhere wearing the Phoenix outfit. And so for Cyclops, that's kind of weird because Jean Grey was never the Phoenix. So why in the world is she wearing the Phoenix outfit? And so for Cyclops, is him right now just being on guard because this is coming right after the Onslaught saga as well, where you had Charles Xavier turn to Onslaught and basically wreck New York. It made more problems for, well, the mutant race. And so for Scott, it's him saying, listen, we have to be on guard when it comes to telepaths like Charles Xavier or Jean Grey or even Psylocke as well. But getting back over to the Rogue plot line, we do pick up a Rogue right now, meeting up with Aubrey Agee. Now, Aubrey Agee is this scientist who apparently claimed that he has the ability to turn mutants back into regular humans. And apparently he was able to help his sister out as well and turn her into a regular human again. And he wants to help Rogue achieve that same thing as well. The thing was, you had Rogue watch Aubrey leave a company known as Mutopia. And so for Rogue, she wants to know what is his connection with that company. Now Aubrey says that company's main goal is to try to build a world that's perfect for all races. But for Aubrey, he was kind of invited into the company to help them achieve that goal. But apparently he declined their offer. And the reason why? So that he can continue his work to help mutants turn back into regular humans again. But getting back over to Scott, Jean Grey, Bobby, Iceman, and also Beast, we do see those characters right now heading over to into town to get something to eat. Except when they arrive in town, they see a protest going on. Now, this protest is all about the idea of a group of Native Americans who are very upset about the fact that their people had lost their land over time. So their goal is to hopefully reclaim their lost land. Now, while that protest is going on, you have our heroes continue to go in town, except for Bobby. He does see this old man once again. And this old man is now talking about the idea of the Chulian, the crow god, will make the world black with his shadow. And then the old man once again disappear. But when our heroes go inside the restaurant, we do see a bunch of crows begin to appear over the city. But that leads us into Uncanny X-Men issue number 357 because we now pick up with our heroes just trying their best to enjoy their dinner. Except while doing that, you didn't have our heroes realize that there are a crowd of people out there just freaking out. And so you have our hero decide to leave the restaurant to go help those people out, to realize that those people are being attacked by a bunch of crows. So you have our heroes trying their best to help out, but without using their abilities. And the reason why, because they don't want the town to know that they are mutants. And so they're trying their best. Now, for Bobby, he does see something very interesting, and that would be the guy we saw at the end of the last chapter. Now, he's out there celebrating the idea of these crows just flying around the city. And so we see him right now being excited about it because he did say earlier the crow god will bring his shadow upon this area. And so we see him right now just being happy. Now, the sheriff of the town, he does appear to help out a situation by firing a shotgun out into the air to hopefully get rid of the crows. But now we have to get into the road plot line just once again. And we do pick up with, well, Aubrey again, the scientist who apparently has a way to cure mutants. And we see inside his laboratory, and we see him right now talking to somebody. And we kind of find out that he is talking to, well, his sister, the person he had claimed to cure who was a mutant and now apparently back to a human. But the problem is that when we look over to see his sister, it does look like that she is deformed, like some kind of creature. So we're kind of wondering, did the process make things worse? Now, technically, we can tell it did, but in his mind, she looks beautiful. But for a brief moment, we do have to shift back over to Alaska, and we do pick up with our first class X-Men, who right now is hanging out in the home belonging to Cyclops and Jean Grey. Well, while being there, you didn't have Jean Grey walk out in her, well, Phoenix outfit about the idea of getting back out there to help the town out that's currently being attacked by some crows. Now, for the different members of the X-Men, they're beginning to freak out because they're seeing Jean Grey in her Phoenix outfit, just right there, kind of like, whoa, what are you wearing that for? But you didn't have Melissa walk in. Now, Melissa, remember, she is a sister-in-law to the sheriff. And so when she walks into the home, you have the different members of the first class X-Men begin to freak out because for Angel, his wings are out. Beast, he is no longer trying to hide his true form. But for Melissa, she's kind of like, listen, I know you're mutants and I don't care. Matter of fact, I love mutants just as much as I love humans, but I need your guys' help. And the reason why, because my brother-in-law is right now out in the city by himself trying to handle the crow situation, and he might get seriously hurt. We also have to remember about the plot line that's going on when it comes to Bishop and also Deathbird. You see, in an earlier storyline, you had some members of the X-Men go into space and travel over to the Shi'ar Empire to basically help them out. On their way back home, their spaceship got destroyed. Now, most of the X-Men were able to get back to Earth. Bishop did not. Matter of fact, Deathbird at the very last second teleported her and him somewhere else. Now, for Bishop, he was informed the X-Men are dead. But for Bishop, he kind of realized that Deathbird is lying. And the reason why? Because Deathbird has a major crush on Bishop. She wants to be with him. But right now, their current spaceship is about to crash into the sun. And so you have Bishop say, listen, go ahead and free me. I'm not going to leave you. I also love you as well, but I want to survive. And so you have Deathbird kind of realize that he may be serious. And so she does go out of his way to release him. Now, the ending of the storyline is kind of confusing and kind of ends just, well, nowhere. Let me explain. Because you do have our heroes go into Alaska to basically help out with the situation. For Iceman, his goal is to find the guy who they believe might summon the actual crows in the area, while you have Angel and Beast try to see if there is another source for why the crows are attacking people right now in the city, while you have Cyclops and Jean Grey continue to fight against the birds. Now, for Cyclops, he has to be careful. And the reason why, because just recently he had a bomb removed from his body. But the doctors told him, do not use your powers for a short period of time. But for Cyclops, he has no choice. He has to go ahead and use his powers. Now, for Jean Grey, she also finds this mechanical bird, and she kind of believes the bird could be the reason why the crows are right now in this area. But here's the problem with the story, because once you do have our heroes continue to fight against the crows to the point where you have the crows come together to create this huge shadow figure of a bigger crow, but once you do have our heroes being able to get rid of the robot crow, but also like make sure the crows stay away from the city, you have our heroes kind of wonder like, what is the actual reason behind the crows being there? Like, why were they there? And so you have them wonder about different things that could have brought the crows here, but none of those different ideas are actually confirmed. And the book ends on that note right there, leaving you wondering, like, what in the world is going on here when it comes to the crows attacking this town. But this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.